Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 11. So, yeah, there you go. 11.
I thought it was 12.
I thought it was 11.
Because wasn't I just doing this last episode?
No, I think we talked about that you would have to do it the next episode.
Oh. Darn it.
I don't remember. Well, if it is 12,
Welcome
that
to
means...
the latest episode of Get the Flick Out of Here.
Hey, the more that we do, the more we get paid for them. So that's good. Hey, I'm Alex Pawlowski, and this is Kate.
That's me. I'm Kate.
Yeah, Kate Elizabeth. We do a show here on the Know Your News channel called Get the Flick Out of Here, which is all about watching weird and different, watching different movies. Different, just special, still different.
Unique.
Unique movies. Weird, dumb, wacky types of movies. And wouldn't you know it, this week we had some requests from the boss man. He was like,
Big
I
boss man.
I want you to do these. And I'm like, well, who are we to say no? Because you pay us.
That's a good point.
And so the first one that he had requested was one that we decided we were going to do today because it is free to stream. So the easiest way
that helps.
Done.
That helps.
It helps. It's a little flick called UHF.
I was 2 years old when it came out.
Yes, I was much older than that. So
you were 4.5 years old when it came out.
Was
my goodness.
Much older than that. So the thing about the whole UHF is such an odd thing. Like, you would even name a movie that now, looking back on it.
Yeah.
Because that's not a thing that even comes close to existing anymore. But my parents had an old tube black and white TV with an actual dial. Like, don't touch that dial was an actual thing. And it was there were two dials actually. And you could either turn the dial to find the broadcast channels. I know that where I grew up, the broadcast channels that we got were 13 was CBS, and 9 was ABC, and 5 was NBC. And that was it, because that's how old I am. And later, I guess there was a Fox channel, but it wasn't when I was young. And then there was this whole other dial that was UHF. It said right above it, UHF. And if you turned the main dial to 0, straight up and down, you could then turn all the UHF channels. And I remember sitting there with this tiny little tube black and white TV just going click, 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 click. And there was something different on all of these channels. But it was always really badly tuned in, because we lived far away from any of these broadcasting stations. So my first experience with UHF was all this weird, garbled, badly pixelated TV on this tiny little black and white television. And the idea about what UHF was VHF is the original broadcasting stations, and then UHF was all the other ones, 13 through 83 or something. And for a while in the 70s and 80s, that was where all your independent television was, cable access and all this kind of stuff was. Before cable access, there was UHF. And these little stations, every major city would have several UHF stations. They would broadcast weird little things like like interviews of random people and stuff. And it is so foreign to think about now because that's just not what that is. But I have thought about what it's the most similar to. If you have a streaming TV or like a Roku box or whatever, and you go, I would like to add more streaming channels to my streaming TV. You can go and you'd add all these random little niche things that from all over the web. Like, this is a thing. And that's what UHF kind of was. Like, you could find a little channel that had random crap on it. And maybe you had no interest in it, but it's out there. And that's the closest I think that exists now to what UHF was then. And then when when TV made the full switch to digital, like, UHF just disappeared. But it had fallen out of favor long before then with the advent of cable. But before everybody had cable, there was this thing called UHF. And for some reason, in 1989, they made a movie about it starring Weird Al Yankovic. That so endeth the lesson about the history of UHF.
That's it. That's the whole podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I, being so young and fresh and hip,
a baby, a literal baby.
But the first thing I knew of UHF was the song UHF from this movie and the music video that went with it, and my dad explaining to me what it was a parody of and stuff like that. So that was my first window into UHF, and then my dad explained to me some of the stuff that you just told me. But I didn't know what any of it was, but I loved Weird Al growing up. I had several cassettes. If you are not old enough to remember UHF, but old enough that you remember cassettes, that's my that's where I fit in on the spectrum. But I just and there were some songs I didn't even know what he was probably talking about or what songs he was originally parodying, but I loved Weird Al
loved it
growing up, and
loved it.
Still do, honestly. I think he has such a special place in music and music history, and just I don't know, he has a very carved out special place in my heart, Weird Al, for some reason. I always just, even when I was a little kid, was so, before we had the 5 CD changer, I had Weird Al tapes along with the Lion King soundtrack and Aladdin soundtrack and what else? Mariah Carey Fantasy, I think. So a fun array in my household for things like that. But yeah, that was all before I knew what UHF even was. I knew of the music video parody that's in this movie and the movie before I knew what UHF television was 100%.
Yeah. I went through my Weird Al phase as I think so many adolescent boys do. Especially if you grew up in that era, because that was some prime Weird Al. That was when he released the Nevermind spoof album, which had great things in there, like obviously Smells Like Nirvana as opposed to Smells Like Teen Spirit, and The White Stuff, Not the Right Stuff, which was all about eating Oreos. Some of the things were really, really simple.
Amish Paradise is a top 10 for me.
Right. And that was later. That was when he got but before, in the 80s, he was releasing 2 or 3 albums a year. He was just cranking out these brilliant parody songs.
Stat from Michael Jackson's Bad. It's so many. And you're right, they were album after album after album. I think he thought he was going to capture a moment in time, but his career just continued, which is kind of cool.
It was no one's I saw him in I went and saw him in concert in the late 90s, and it was just crazy to me how how much energy he had as a performer too, like running around the stage from accordion to accordion, like changing costume and going crazy and playing all these instruments, while his band just what mimicked perfectly 10 different kinds of music. Like that's really hard to do. You can be a really great rock band, but it's hard to be a really great rock band and a really great polka band. Like that's hard to do, but they were able to do it because it's what they did.
I think people drastically underestimate with comedy like that how important it is that you're good as musicians, because you can't be the joke and in control of the joke at the same time.
No.
You get one or the other. And like if he had a shit voice, it wouldn't work. If his band sucked, it wouldn't work because they would be the butt of the joke. But you have to be really, really good as musicians in order to stay in control.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. For those of you who don't know, Weird Al Yankovic is the greatest parody songwriter in the history of the world. And that's what his claim to fame was. But he also wrote a lot of his own stuff. But it came to a point where some of the stuff that he was originally parodying was before my time, and I had never heard some of the originals that he was parodying until later, much later. So I knew that a lot of his stuff was original works, and so I would go through life assuming that one song or another was a thing he had wrote himself, and then later I heard the actual song and said, "What?" Because I remember I thought that what a brilliant song was that he came up with out of whole cloth by himself, just off the top of his brilliant noggin. I Lost on Jeopardy. It's a brilliant song. But it was like 6 or 7 years later that I first heard the song Our Love's in Jeopardy. And I thought to myself, well, of course he wrote that song. Of course he wrote the song because the original is so ridiculous to begin with. It begs to be parodied.
Asking for it, yeah.
Yeah, and some of the stuff is just, it's so, because you got the perfect cadence, and sometimes like the rhymes match, like it's
even just the production, like
all of it.
It's so good. It's pretty crazy.
And this is the thing about UHF that I think hurts the movie. They only have Weird Al sing one song during the film. Weird Al plays a guy who's not a musician. This is the weirdest thing about it. They said, let's try and make Weird Al Yankovic, noted musical parodyist, into a movie star and not have him play a musician or a singer or any of it. And that's a bad decision on their part. Like if the movie was a musical, or if he was playing a person who did music, I think that it may have been more successful. And I don't know if this was like a plan to like make Weird Al a mainstream movie star to help him sell albums or what, but it showed a lot of his comedy chops, like the weird bonkers ideas that he had kicking around his brain that didn't need necessarily to be set to music, but which is all well and good. And yet I think the strongest thing that he does in the entire movie is the one song that he sings, because it's one of his very best parodies. It's a parody of Money for Nothing and Chicks for Free by Dire Straits, but he turns it into basically the Beverly Hillbillies song.
It's so good.
Instead of I want my MTV, he says Beverly Hillbillies, and they just sings the actual Beverly Hillbillies lyrics
Hills, that is.
with this song, which doesn't even make any friggin' sense. And it's so great. And the video is such a perfect parody of the original Dire Straits video. Like, it's so great. And it's just a dream sequence. In the movie, he falls asleep at work. And he has a dream that he's the lead guitarist of Dire Straits singing the Beverly Hillbillies song, but like it doesn't make any sense. Like it's a thing. It's fine. It's fun to watch, but it's like we'll talk more about the whole arc of everything. But that stands out to me as being like, well, that's your movie. Figure out a way to make that into the movie, and to have him do weird things, like have him be a guy who's struggling to be an actual musician, but then decides to like play a cover of a song at some random bar mitzvah or whatever, but he doesn't remember the lyrics to the song, and he comes up with his own on the fly, and all of a sudden that shoots him into like local stardom and then regional stardom, and then all of a sudden he's playing the Tonight Show, and he has no idea how he got there. And then you could do kind of, this is actually would predate the thing that I'm talking that they should parody, but I think they would have been smart enough to figure it out how to do it anyway. You do behind the music, like an actual live behind the music with all the people being like, because what is behind the music if not basically like taking This Is Spinal Tap and turning it into an actual thing.
Yeah.
And so you basically do This Is Spinal Tap, but with Weird Al Yankovic and all of his buddies, like yelling at each other, doing drugs, and sleeping with promiscuous women on the tour bus, yelling at each other about what song they should parody next. Like, I think you could have really made Weird Al into an interesting household name by making the movie closer to what he actually was as an artist, as opposed to let's make a movie not at all about this and cast Weird Al Yankovic in it.
Well, I think he was part right. Like he was one of the writers of the movie. So maybe that was like a decision he made, but there's also, even in this movie, there's so many side avenues for more songs he could have written. Cause there's such an emphasis on him using his imagination. We'll get more into it, but like essentially they lean into this insane, wacky programming as a way to boost their ratings. And you could have easily had him doing some sort of like weird musical or something. Like there are opportunities in what they presented already for him to have more music in it. So whether they went your route or just kept to this script, I think there were probably more chances. I'm wondering if this, because he also had his own TV show for a minute. Like, I wonder if he just had his own desire to kind of like do something creative that was separate from that. But like, I don't know. I agree with you. Like, it was so funny and perfect and spot on. And my God, the music video. And like, also just the idea that that song was like about MTV, right? Like the I Want My MTV stuff. And like music television, and we're talking about this like weird UHF television stuff, like is such a fun parody on itself. But I agree with you. I feel like there were probably more opportunities within the film itself to do more with it.
So we talked about what the movie isn't. I guess we'll talk about now what the movie is.
Sure.
It begins with a fairly spot on parody of the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. I don't know why, because at this point, like Raiders of the Lost Ark was like 7-8 years old at that point, so it was like wasn't like it was timely, but it's pretty spot on with him, of course, as Indiana Jones, and then these two random guys, being his Hispanic guides through the woods. There's the one guy who's definitely a criminal who pulls a gun on him, and he turns around, and just like Indy does, Harrison Ford in the original movie, he uses his whip to knock the gun out of his hand. Did I say knock the gun out of his hand? I meant like completely amputate his arm. And I don't know if you noticed this, Kate, but I noticed it the first time I saw this movie and every time since, and it always kills me because I know it's intentional because that's who Weird Al Yankovic is. The guy pulls a gun with his left hand and holds it out. And then he whips him, and then the whole arm drops to the ground. And when it does, it is quite obviously a right arm holding the gun like this. And it's great because they could have used the left arm of a mannequin, and it was not a mistake. They said it would be even funnier if he whipped the wrong hand. And this time I was watching it going like, this is a really long dream sequence. This is a really long fake movie scene, and it's not a fake movie scene. It's a daydream that he's having. But I forgot about how this really, there's so little of it that's actually himself doing anything in the real world. It's all like in his own mind. But he goes into the cave with the guy. He says, "No, you cannot go any further, senor. That sign, it means we should not go any further." And so that guy leaves, and he backs out of the cave. And as he stands there in the cave entrance, he is run over by a train. And
there's also a million signs that just say "wrong way."
Well, there's the thing is that after that guy leaves and gets by a train, then Weird Al proceeds, and he walks by. Do not enter, wrong way. Do not back up, severe tire damage. All of these signs as he walks past. We cannot go any further, senor. Look at the sign. We cannot leave. And it's not like a sign, but it's a sign.
Yeah.
That's great. And the thing that he comes upon is not a golden idol, but it is an Oscar. So in some ways, it is a golden idol, and it is an unobtainable object. And then he runs away from the boulder with the Oscar, and the boulder follows him through very bad green screen all over the world, and then eventually. He gets so tired from running away from the boulder that he falls down and is rolled over by the boulder, and becomes like a greasy spot on the ground.
It was at the wrong way sign that I remembered how much that this reminded me of, like, because I had forgotten before. I remembered that there were a ton of parodies, but like that same type of sense of humor that was like the Naked Gun movies and Airplane. I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot how much in that same vein this movie is. And I love comedy like that. Airplane's one of my favorites, especially.
Oh, yeah. And then we realize that it's just him. He's had this, I don't know, 6.5 minute fantasy sequences played out in his brain while he is manning the grill at a burger joint. And
Burger World, I think it was called.
I believe it was Big Edna's Burger World. And then he talks some shit about Big Edna. He frankly does a little bit of body shaming.
It's true. It was 1989.
It was. And then Big Edna overhears him and his best friend, Ed? I don't remember what the best friend's name is. And
that'd be pretty lazy.
Bob. And Big Edna fires both Weird Al Yankovic and Bob. By fires, I mean literally throws them across the parking lot. And then Weird Al goes back to Bob's apartment to talk about where they should apply for a job next, because Weird Al keeps getting them fired because he daydreams too much, and I guess insults the people who work there. Also, there's Getty Watanabe from 16 Candles, I think, is a neighbor who runs a a very violent karate instruction school.
Yes.
Where
I
people
forgot that
are
this cast was such Cracker
yeah,
Jacks too in general.
are literally being punching through walls, and that's how Weird Al Yankovic says, "Oh my God, look at the time!" By looking at the watch on a man's arm that is punched through the wall, and he has to leave. And he is dating, I believe, living with Victoria Jackson from SNL. Now, since then, she's lost her mind and gone absolutely way off the deep end. But at the time, she was a darling of SNL, and she's a very put upon girlfriend, um, and she wishes that he would be, hold down a steady job and be somebody that she could rely on, but he can't because he's got dreams.
Got all these big dreams, man.
He leaves dinner with Victoria Jackson, I believe her name is Terry, and goes to his aunt's place. I think that's who this is.
Yeah.
His aunt, and she is very sympathetic to his plight, but knows that he'll get another job. And then Uncle Harvey, who was a degenerate gambler, but he's on a hot streak, wins the deed to a UHF station in town, and he was planning on selling it, but his wife, Aunt whatever her name is, convinces him to make Weird Al, whose name is George Newman, which is just weird. All right. George, to make George the manager of said station and basically run the station. But it's a failing enterprise. It'll never get off the ground. Nobody watches the U62, and there's no chance. So Weird Al goes there with Bob. Bob, I guess, is going to work there with him. And they meet Fran Drescher, the nanny, who's like pre-nanny fame.
God, so good. In all of this, she was also in Spinal Tap and phenomenal in that.
Yes.
I thought like scene stealer, but it is funny to see her not in the role that she's best known for anytime in these little movies.
And she's there, and she's the secretary, but she was hired years ago and told that she was going to be like the number one ace news reporter, but there is no news desk. So this is, I think, where we find our first glimpse into Channel 8, the big corporate affiliate. They don't say what network is the affiliate for. Run by Kevin McCarthy from Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Inner Space and all kinds of movies. Shout out to his daughter, who I went to college with, Tess. Oh. If you're out there somewhere watching this, how's it going, Tess?
God bless you.
Good friend in college. Tess
he's
McCarthy.
Great too.
Yeah, he's yes. He's very, very, very good in these movies. I loved him in Inner Space, which is another great, weird ass movie. We probably will have to watch Inner Space at some point, just because I would like to watch Inner Space, and then we can watch Inner Space and talk about Inner Space. But this, he's evil, obviously. He's obviously evil, and he's got a bunch of sycophantic yes men who, including one of them who is his own son, who will, he can bark orders at. He fires the janitor for losing a very important report. The janitor, of course, is played by Michael Richards, who played Kramer. Like, this cast is
ridiculous.
Too good. I'm going to say too good for this movie.
Because I remember seeing this movie, but it was a long time ago. I did not remember how like crackerjack this cast was for something that I think it's fair to say it's probably like cult classic-y, if you could even go that far.
I don't know what the budget could have possibly been on a movie like this, but like,
yeah, this was pre everybody's stardom, clearly.
yeah,
Like
clearly, yeah. But anyway, this is Michael Richards' best performance. He's better than Kramer here. Like, it's
unbelievable.
Stanley Spadowski is the most earnest and truthful portrayal of a developmentally disabled adult I think I may have ever seen. Like,
honest to God,
he's
really
there does not feel like there is an ounce of judgment in the portrayal of the character. It's just this guy who's just so loves being a janitor, and has a knack for this other thing that we find out later what he's so great at. But he gets fired unjustly because it turns out Kevin McCarthy was sitting on the report the entire time. George Newman is there to, for some reason, the mailman delivered something mistakenly to U62 that should have gone to Channel 8. So he was there to turn it in, I guess. And that's when he meets Stanley Spadowski, Kramer, Michael Richards, and hires him to be the janitor at U62. And that's how the whole thing starts. Yes, he also meets Kevin McCarthy, who's just an asshole all around, but
thinks he stole the report.
Right. That's his first thing and first deal there.
I will say a symptom of 1989, not the most diverse cast in the world. A lot of white people and white old guys. However, a bunch of radio executives, it makes sense that they're a bunch of like average.
That would have been
dudes.
true to the time. I believe there's one black cast member who is the morbidly obese cameraman for U62.
Yes.
Who at one point gets his own show on the network. It's so they start trying to figure out a way to like make U62 into a viable program so that they wouldn't lose money. Bob crunches the numbers and says, we're going to be flat broke by the end of the week. So this is around the time they start seeing like commercial parodies and weird, like the normal type of UHF stuff that you would normally see, which is one we see George, Weird Al Yankovic, interviewing what we are told is the high school shop teacher, played by the brilliant, wacky stand-up comedian Emo Phillips. And if you've heard Emo Phillips speak, you know exactly what that is. And of course, to prove, like, showing off, this is what a table saw does. He amputates his own thumb, and there's blood everywhere. And whoa, it's my face red. And he's the crazy Emo Phillips, but
and like my finger sprung a leak kind of bleeding, to go along with it. It's perfect.
Oh my goodness. That will happen. But the parody is what happens, but the actual thing of I'm here with the local high school shop teacher is absolutely an interview that would happen on a UHF station. Which is why they're so weird and why nobody watched UHF. So he's trying to find different things that work. Like there's a Uncle Nutsy's Funhouse, which is a kid's show, and the kids who are there are not happy to be in the audience. And this is Weird Al Yankovic trying to be Uncle Nutsy or whatever, and it's not working all that great for him. This is also where he somehow he sends word via a commercial. It's a static piece of paper in front of the camera, and then his own voice over the airwaves saying to his dental hygienist girlfriend, "Bring your mom and dad to the fanciest French restaurant in town, and I'll meet you there to take you out for your birthday." And then somehow, after having sent that, he forgets that he sent that, and also forgets that it was her birthday, and leaves them sitting there alone until late into the night, when he realizes that, oh no, I forgot all about it. And then it's she calls the station from the payphone and says, "From now on, you can forget all of my birthdays because we're through." And so he goes into a deep, dark depression. And he says, hey, Stanley Spadowski. Hey, Michael Richards. Hey, Kramer. Would you like your own show? Great. You're Uncle Nutsy now. You can do your show. What does it matter? We're going to be broke by the end of the week anyway. I don't care. I need a drink. You don't drink. I have a meeting to start. And they walk, I don't know, across the street to a bar filled with patrons. And they're all watching on the TV Stanley Spadowski, who's a natural at hosting a kids show because he talks and thinks like them.
It is incredible what an innocence it was played with. Like, yes. Michael Richards was really, really in, again, a decade at a time that was probably getting off on making fun of things like this. Like, an excellent, honest portrayal. It's really sweet.
Yeah. And so he becomes such a sensation that the entire station starts raking in ad revenue and money and all this stuff, and they start having all these new shows. Including, I forget, now there's a news show hosted by Fran Drescher where she does on the spot reporting and all this kind of stuff. There's a practical jokes show starring said morbidly obese black cameraman where he just trips people coming out of the supermarket, and that's the whole practical joke show. There's a show with a guy named Raul, I think, who's likes animals, and it's shot in his apartment, and he just keeps throwing dogs out the window, and they don't land so good, and it's a very odd little show.
He's like, "Hey, little Fluffy, I'm gonna teach you how to fly today," and then throws the dog out the window and just goes, "Oh no!" Basically, it's so funny.
I mean, it starts innocently enough, like, "Hey, I want to introduce you to this turtle. Here's a turtle. He's got these stubby little legs, and he's got this house that he lives in. It's a shell, but it's really his house." I'm like, "Hey, that's good. That's educational for the kids." And he's like throwing dogs out the window. We're like, "Okay, now we lost you."
I think it's Bob and George both look at each other and basically are like, "Where'd you find this guy?" And he's like,
"I thought you hired him."
I thought you hired him. They realized they never hired him.
Great gag. There's a few more like these little parodies of things. Gandhi 2, where Gandhi gives up his life of being a peace activist and decides to become a hard-bitten cop in the big city. These are things that were a lot of these deals feel like they are rejected SNL skits, and like, I don't know if that was going to work. Okay, great. I'll keep it in my back pocket, and later I'll make a movie. And so there's all of this is happening, and then there's a very ominous bookie that works with Uncle Harvey named Big Louie, and who's like Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget, except he doesn't have a cat in his lap. And he basically says, "Hey, Uncle Harvey, you lost a big on the ponies, so you need to come up with $75,000 in 2 days, or I'll kill you." And Uncle Harvey has decided, well, no, why am I going to get $75,000? And U62 is now number 1 in the ratings.
So also in this scene, though, I love that 2 things. One, the uncle is just on the phone in the pool.
Yes.
Which was, keep in mind, pre-cell phone, like huge cordless phone, drops it in the pool, but it's still working. And then the bookie, in place of a hand, can also put like a cleaver. And to imply that he's going to kill him, he puts his cleaver hand and chops like basically a salami or a tube of meat or whatever. But you see him change his hand into a cleaver, and it's just a really funny scene.
But this coincides with Kevin McCarthy being told that that U62 is now number 1 in the ratings, beating Channel 8. Everyone is watching U62 because they are a sensation now. And
they also, in an earlier scene, sorry to interrupt, but
please do.
They tried to warn him basically that Channel U62 is coming up. And it's like this ad exec in a cowboy hat with a mustache. And he kicks him out of the office and says, "And take that ridiculous thing off." And he takes off his mustache and not the cowboy hat. It's like such a stupid, fun detail that I was like, this is like Airplane so much to me, that read of like these lights are blinking out of sequence. What do we do? Make them blink in sequence or whatever, like all that silliness.
So I so anyway, what we got to get rid of this U62. I know what I'll do. Find out who owns U62 and I'll buy it from them. And so he happens to call Uncle Harvey, who just found out that he needs $75,000. So he's going to buy it. And then he shows up the next day. Kevin McCarthy does to sell George, basically, Weird Al Yankovic, "I'm going to turn your place into a parking lot," whatever. So Aunt Shirley, I don't know what her name is, Aunt Shirley says, "How dare you sell to that bad man? You gotta give George a chance to get it done, to come with the money himself." So Uncle Harvey has to give, because his wife says so, has to give George 2 days to come up with the money to buy U62 himself. And how are we going to do that? It's not possible. By the way, Kevin McCarthy finding out that he reneged on Uncle Harvey reneged on an oral contract is very, very upset by this.
Yes.
But they decide they're going to do a telethon. There's I skipped over this part, but it doesn't really matter. Earlier in the thing, there was the very extended Beverly Hillbillies Dire Straits parody, which was just him literally asleep at his desk at this place.
It's just a daydream.
Yeah, that's all it was. I should also mention there's a guy who works at the UHF station at U62. He's the engineer. He's the guy he's the guy in the truck, right? But it's not a truck, it's a back room. And he's got wacky hair and a little beard. And he's very odd.
He's a mad scientist.
He's a mad scientist character type of thing. At one point, because he knows that we gotta find a way to keep an eye on this Kevin McCarthy character because we don't trust him. So this guy, this crazy dude with the hair, mad scientist fella, somehow gets in the crawl space above Kevin McCarthy's office and plants a camera in there to watch him, to literally watch him. That's such a weird character.
He looks very, what's his name from Back to the Future?
Yeah.
Christopher Lloyd.
A little Doc Brownie. A little Doc Brown in there. So they decided to run a telethon, which of course is hosted by Stanley Spadowski. And they are not taking donations. They are selling shares in the UHF thing for $10 a piece. So they're going to sell 7,500 of them at $10 a piece, and that's how they're going to make $75,000. So they're doing great. They're making really good money in the first few hours. But then they decide that they're going to kidnap Stanley Spadowski because he's their star. So they sent a bunch of toughs, a bunch of hoods,
to pay them a visit. I love the language that was.
We're gonna go pay him a visit. And they kidnap Stanley Spadowski, but they do it in such a great way. It's such a funny thing. We got a pizza here for Stanley Spadowski. Oh, I love pizza. And he opens the door and immediately is kidnapped. And then there's they cut to two guys in the front, two guys in the back, and Stanley Spadowski with a bandana loosely tied over his eyes, and he's got his handcuffed behind his back. He's just talking about how much he loves pizza. And oh, I love pizza. I love anchovies and all these kind of things that he loves on pizza. Say, you guys aren't from the pizza company at all, are you? After the longest time of him not realizing what the hell's going on. It was very, very good. They take him to some warehouse somewhere, and he annoys them so much that they have to put him in a closet. It's really dark in here. It's very, very, just very good stuff. And there's one guy who's like, Stanley, I'm trying really hard to keep these other guys from literally shooting you. You have to. All you got to do is just shut up, and when the time limit is over, then we'll let you out. But you just got to shut up. I loved him trying to be the reasonable one who won't let the other guys shoot Stanley. I thought that was great. And of course, without Stanley, the telethon's going to hell. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to buy shares in this thing.
Yeah.
He's the big star. So this guy, I can't remember his name. Maybe I'll have to look it up because mad scientist guy, Doc Brownie guy.
Yes.
Is able to see with the little camera in the office that they have Stanley Spadowski taken prisoner, and so he tells George Weird Al Yankovic about this, and so it's like, I'll take care of it. And so he runs across town, and while he's running, he has a daydream that he is Rambo, and it's one of those things of I don't know exactly if this worked, but I do admire their commitment to the bit because they put Weird Al in a really good looking for 1989 muscle suit. That looked pretty damn realistic for what it was supposed to be.
It looked like he was in a body cast more than a suit. It was very, for 1989, good. For present day, looked like hamburger meat.
Right. No, it's not great.
He looked like the end of Ric Flair's career where he looked like a melted candle. It was kind of like that.
Yeah. But he's trying to be Stallone, so kind of.
Oh, it worked. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, he's got the bandana little thing tied around his neck. And so he of course sneaking into a prisoner of war camp to rescue Stanley Spadowski in this daydream, mind you. Along the way, he is able to kill a man with an explosive tipped arrow from 6 inches away as the man fires an AK-47 at him and misses everything. And then he's able to get Stanley Spadowski out and get him back to a chopper. And then a whole line of guys appear on a ridge. They're all going to shoot at him. So then he grabs a giant machine gun out of the chopper and goes, and they all fall down.
At the same time. That was my favorite part. They all collapse at the same time.
And then one guy's still alive, so he just blows him up. just blows him to smithereens. And my favorite part about this whole thing is that in the daydream, Stanley Spadowski is Stanley Spadowski. Like, oh.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Like, just great stuff. And they finally get in the chopper and leave. And that, I guess, is the cue to end the daydream. And George Newman shows up at the office where they're holding Stanley Spadowski prisoner and just says, "I'm your worst nightmare." And then they put guns in his face. He's like, "Oh, actually, no, I'm not." So
never called the cops.
Nope, never once reported it or anything. Just went over there to actually just try and get him out the old-fashioned way. And this is where I must have dozed off. How the hell did they get out of that situation?
Oh, with like just the funniest escape scene from Michael Richards. Like he just gets out of the closet and is like crawling under people's legs, and he makes
that's how they got from the warehouse to the office, which I guess I missed. That's how they got from the warehouse to the office. And now I forget how they got. Oh, that's wow. Because I forgot to mention this. Remember Getty Watanabe from before?
That's right.
He's got his own show on UHF.
Of course he did.
Apparently, he didn't have he didn't call the cops, but he called Getty Watanabe, who brought all of his chop sake students, and they decided to kung fu all the bad guys with guns, and that's how they got out of the thing. They actually drive away in a series of vehicles that are all filled to the brim with guys in karate gis, and they show up just in time, and Michael Richards is able to sell a whole bunch of more shares. Kevin McCarthy shows up with his suitcase full of cash, and Uncle Harvey's there, and it's like, hey, we're gonna be a little late, but we're definitely gonna have the money. It's like, but then Big Louie's limo pulls up, and a Big Louie is absolutely going to chop off all of Uncle Harvey's limbs in the middle of this very crowded parking lot with literally hundreds of witnesses who have all showed up waving $10 bills in the air so they can buy a share. And Uncle Harvey doesn't think to, like, I don't know, go inside the building right behind him and lock the door just long enough for Weird Al to get enough money, because they're at like $73,140 or whatever. He's like, I guess the only thing I have to do is to sell to Kevin McCarthy. So Kevin McCarthy, the mad scientist guy records Kevin McCarthy saying mean things about the town. This community means about as much to me as a festering bowl of dog snot.
Festering bowl
All
of dog
people
snot.
who live here are idiots. He cuts a hell of a wrestling heel promo.
He does.
Everybody who lives in this town is fat, and they smell bad because this town smells bad. So the stink of this town gets all over the fat people who live here. It's very, very, it does a whole thing. So at one point, he decides to, in a plea to get everyone to stop donating to the telethon, he decides he's going to do a special commentary on Channel 8, and Doc Brown guy like supersedes it, like ends that feed and puts in the feed of this guy when he thought nobody was watching, talking about the bowl of dog snot, the heel wrestling promo.
It's also so funny because when you see him back, like doing his mad scientist work, like there's tubes of chemicals and stuff, like completely unrelated to anything like technology wise.
No.
He's always doing some like chemical experiment.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
He's a genius in this way too, I guess.
Right, exactly. So that's why this guy has to resort to spending $75,000. But I'm going to get on the microphone and I'm going to tell these people what I really think of them. So he does that while they actually get over the hump of $75,000 because, and I should probably mention this, there's a homeless guy who appears throughout the movie asking for change. And at one point, Kevin McCarthy gives the guy 1 penny. And he, we think the joke is that he goes, "Oh, gee, thanks, mister. Wow, thanks so much for this penny." And you think, oh, the guy's a little crazy. He's gone a little off. He's a little insane, little crazy, because you shouldn't be celebrating getting a penny. But the reason he's celebrating is because apparently he's a coin collector, and he recognizes that it's like a double face Lincoln from 1955 or whatever, and it's worth thousands of dollars. And so he sold it to get all this money, and that's why he wants to buy all these shares of this place. So his buying of the shares puts them over the top.
And I think earlier we know he's not just asking for money, because doesn't he say, "Do you have any change?"
Yes.
And Weird Al gives him 4 quarters and he goes, "Here's $1." I think that happens earlier. So he's like literally asking for change.
That's the first time we ever
funny.
saw him. He's like, "Change, mister, you got any change?" "Sir." And he gives him 4 quarters, and he gives and "Thanks, mister," and gives him $1 back. So he's
Which
just
is so great because it's like he's literally asking for change.
Just looking for change. Change for $1.
He's trying to do his laundry.
He's trying to do his laundry. Gonna go down to the go down to the little those little old things they used to have where you could like put in a couple of quarters and open the thing and get a newspaper out.
Yeah.
He just wants to look at the want ads. He's anyway. So Kevin McCarthy doesn't get to sell the deed, doesn't get to buy the deed because Uncle Harvey sells it to George while Kevin McCarthy is looking at it happen over there, and they pay off Big Louie, and Big Louie leaves, and Kevin McCarthy has nothing to show for it, and he gets kicked in the balls, I believe, by Fran Drescher, I think.
Yes, because she's doing her on the spot reporting.
Yeah, and earlier in the movie, he says something very, very
women don't
sexist.
belong in this.
Yeah. That whole thing. So she gets him back, and everybody wins, especially because old Doc Brown guy walks up to Terry has decided to take Weird Al back. So he walks up to Terry and Weird Al and says, "Thank you. I have to go to my home planet now, and my home planet needs me. My work here is done." And Weird Al's like, "Okay, thanks for dropping by.
Have fun.
Have fun." And then he walks away, and you can see like his face changes, and he's actually an alien. And then he gets beamed up to his own planet. But
we also have to talk about the Michael Richards escape scene.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, my favorite part of it is he's just like, they've established that he's like not all mentally there, but he's just like able to, in the least clever way possible, escape all these guys.
Yeah.
By like going through, again, not acrobatic at all, just like crawling under their legs. And at one point he escapes into the next room and he puts a chair under the door to jam the door, but it's too short of a chair. Like it doesn't actually go up to the doorknob. So he just opens it a couple times to knock him out. And the final time he's just like, aha, and then leaves. It's just like the most fun 007 escape scene with nothing clever or convincing about it. Like it's absolutely hilarious. So that was my favorite part of him, like getting away from the criminals, was just like when he went to put that chair that was too short under the doorknob. I was in stitches. I thought it was so funny.
Yeah, it's great. It was a great one. The very, very good physical comedy. I know, like Michael Richards' physical comedy, you wouldn't think.
No, yeah.
But yeah, it's very, very good. So that's how they get from the warehouse into the office, which is how Doc Brown guy sees them in the office camera, which is how he's able to alert Weird Al Yankovic,
yes,
who brings a whole team of karate guys with him to rescue Michael Richards so that they can finish the telethon, so they can buy the station, so that the UHF station won't be bought out by evil Kevin McCarthy. It's a very straight up, very easy to follow storyline, just like all movies. It is a movie entirely of its era that honestly, like, by the time it reached any kind of cult status, UHF was just like the actual UHF stuff was in the rearview mirror, because like 89, by 92, like cable was everywhere. Everybody had cable. So like by that point, like nobody knew what UHF was, so it was hard to like have it be a thing of where people like remember something fondly and go like, yes, I still identify with that. And 10 years down the line, because you just can't.
It hit this like weird in between period too, where the internet was not something that was widely accessible or available. Yep. So it's not like people were looking it up either. It's kind of funny. True. We did Team America last week, and we're doing this week. And I know what we're doing next week. We don't have to announce it if you don't want to, but it's 3 weeks in a row of something that's like highly parody, which is fun. Yeah. So that's a fun little run that we're on, because I love things that are parody. But this was by far like the most like cult classic-y. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say low reaching, because I don't want it to seem like it's definitely not lazy, and it's definitely not like low brow in any means, but probably the most surface level, because there's so many parodies of that are widely recognizable, and there's just the Rambo scene, the Indiana Jones scene, like they hit you over the head with it the entire time, and it's fun. It's a fun little watch.
Yeah, it's if somehow you've reached this point in 2022 and you're a huge and you like Weird Al at all, and you haven't seen this movie, I feel like you owe it to yourself to watch it and see what they were trying to do to get Weird Al over as a top star in the business at that time, because it did feel a little misguided. Like, I think he was trying to branch out and be something else, but it's weird when you're the very best to ever do something, which is parody songs. No one's ever done it like that ever. To say, hey, I don't want to do that right now. I want to see if I can do something else. Don't be surprised if the other thing you want to try, you're not nearly as good at as the other thing.
And like 1989, he was white hot on that too. Like you
Right.
said, like he was coming out like album after album after album.
And
Like
they're all bangers.
yeah.
And so that's the other thing is that having him, because he also not a great actor. Like he's a fine parodist, but like when he's trying to like just have a conversation with another character, I feel like he doesn't know what he's gonna do with his hands a lot, and he just kind of like, well, I don't know. And so sometimes like he resorts to like comical overacting when the scene actually requires him to just be a regular dude.
Just
You know what
be
I
a
mean?
person.
Yeah.
It's
and
kind
so-
of in a different way reminds me of like Seinfeld was not a good actor on Seinfeld, but like he clearly had the mind for the comedic side of it. I'm just looking at Weird Al's discography and just like he had albums in 83, 84, 86. I wish this was in order. 83, 84, 86, 88. Man, 92. And this came out in 89. So he went from like 3 albums in a row to a movie back to, and Off the Deep End was 92. So
Yeah.
my goodness. Yeah. Like even worse was the one that had Fat. Gosh. Lasagna was probably one of his most famous ones, right? My word. La 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 lasagna.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
He parodied the Kinks' in hindsight transphobic Lola with a song called Yoda, and it was perfectly done as a parody of Star Wars and everything Star Wars-esque. Like it's crazy. Some of the stuff that came out of his brain was like, oh yeah, I know what I'll turn this very famous song into. This other thing that doesn't make any sense, but it's absolutely perfect.
Well, he did more Star Wars. Remember, he did this here Anakin guy as American Pie.
Yeah.
Like, just crazy stuff.
Yeah, that was yeah. He had an. I mean, the first one he ever did though, the one that got him on the map originally. You know what that was?
I do, but I can't remember. Was it? It was a food one.
My Bologna.
There, yeah.
It was a song. It was My Sharona by the Knack, but it was my Bologna. My all-time favorite one is honestly one of my all-time ones because I love the original song. Is instead of the Eye of the Tiger, it's the Rye or the Kaiser. He's come up with an entirely new sequel to Rocky, where Rocky gets old and fat and buys a deli, and it's just so rich with imagery, and you can totally see like what would actually happen. It like the champ, like he stopped boxing. He got fat, got to do something. He bought a deli. And just the way that he weaves all the stories together. He's just so funny and so smart because it takes a really great brain to come up with all of that stuff. And then the talent to be able to play it. I could write a parody song occasionally, but I couldn't play any instruments to like actually make the music. But he plays like 6. So like he's just crazy smart and crazy talented.
People underestimate like how complex an accordion is of an instrument to play. Like dynamics, side keyboards, like it looks easy because there's so much just like action, but that is a tough instrument that people don't give enough credit for. I mean, Smells Like Teen Spirit is probably my favorite. Can't Watch This is a classic. Like there's so many.
Can't watch
this. Do 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 do.
It's
But yeah,
hard
it's
to
weird how
barg Nargle's house with all these marbles in my mouth. Oh my god.
like that one's so oh god. Like the execution of that is just he's really really smart. And what's so funny with UHF, to your point, is like they just don't lean into what he's best at very much. But they also might not have, I don't think anybody knew necessarily what they were getting with this. But this is one that, we always ask the question of like, would you get the flick out of here or keep it? And for me, it's very, very situational. If you partake in cannabis, I feel like you would have a hell of a time with this. And if you have ample time to waste, I would say watch it, because this was like only an hour and 37 minutes. I think it felt really long, and I felt like the whole thing could have been like 45 minutes. Like, because there's daydreaming sequences and there's so many like stop and stall parody things that I was just like, the plot was like really, really stretched out here. I felt like in a lot of spots, but it was a fun watch. I'm certainly not like, get the flick out of here with any intensity, but the circumstances just definitely have to be right to watch it, I would say.
Yeah. I would say it stands as a like a time capsule.
Yes.
Of like just the whole thing of what a UHF station even is just, I think it's actually explored kind of well within the confines of the movie. And also what the kind of hot streak that Weird Al was on as a performer, that people were like, yes, let's invest in a movie to make this guy a star without him singing anything except for like once, is a crazy statement. It's kind of interesting to like watch to see what they were trying to do with him. And also it turns out to be a vehicle for a bunch of like other people that you recognize elsewhere in the cast. Some of whom had never like in 3 years' time, Kramer was one of the biggest stars on television. Like Michael Richards was one of the biggest stars on television. So it's kind of crazy how fast that happened. By that point, also, like, when did the Nanny start? Like 93?
That's why I was just looking up. Spinal Tap was
82 or whatever.
82, right? Yeah. Let me
84?
see.
84. But like when did
I'm sorry, yeah, the album came out in 82. The movie came out in 84. The Nanny started what year? 93. So
93. It's like 4 years later, she's got her own show on CBS that ran for what, 400 episodes?
Really long.
Like I have really a long ass time that she was on TV herself. And all
that's like my comfort show. I loved The Nanny. Oh, it's so one note, and I love it so much. It's
Mr.
like
Sheffield.
Is he single and Jewish and a doctor? Like, just so many jokes like that. Like, but it's like putting on an old sweater or a bowl of mac and cheese, watching The Nanny. Like, it just.
There you go. Yeah, it's so I that's why for all those reasons I can't say get the flick out of here, because even though the movie I think is wanting in a lot of ways, it's like it's a time capsule, and such a weird thing of like being able to see people before they were something else entirely, before they were stars. Yeah.
And like you said, UHF was such a short-lived thing. It would be like if they made a movie just about Instant Messenger. Or whatever, you know what I mean? Where it was like, this is like 4 years that anyone's going to remember anything of.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
Just wild.
I am the movie. What's your away message is the tagline. Yeah, that... but also, yeah, just it kind of reminds me of The Net with Sandra Bullock, where it's like, the internet is evil. We don't know how it works, but the internet is evil. Look, Sandra Bullock is scared of the net.
I didn't know that was a movie.
Oh, the net. Oh yeah, that's where
It's just kind of right.
It's well, yes,
kind of evil sometimes.
It's kind of evil sometimes. It's just, I think it's just like, oh, there are hackers everywhere, and they're going to get you, Sandra Bullock. Is basically the premise of the movie The Net. I love how from like 1995 until really like 2010, so like computers were just magic. So many screenwriters like writing movies that were bought and made from 95 to 2010 when the internet was still like getting going. Some of the screenwriters were like born in 1955 and had no concept of what they were writing their friggin' shit on typewriters.
Final Draft. What the fuck is that?
No idea what the hell any of it is. But so like, the internet, you know, I heard a guy got on the internet and he was able to like, and it's just all of it is just computers are magic. And it's like, that's not how that works, but that's how they wrote it. Yeah, maybe we'll have to watch The Net one time. Maybe we have to do this again. We have to do these like, I don't know, 40 more of these are requested because we're doing we have a 1-year contract. So
that's right.
At some point we'll do The Net. I don't know when.
Yeah, at some point we have to do you explain something to me like I did to you with Battle Bots.
It's true. It's true.
So we'll have to pick one of those out.
Yeah.
Do you want to announce what next week is?
Well, I was going to say next week is a very special Shark Week episode. And so I'll just leave it at that. And then we'll be back here next week to do that. So, Kate, where can they find you if they want to find you?
Oh, you can find me at Miss Kate Fabe on the internet or Katestagrams on Instagram. And you can also find me on Fightful Tuesdays and Fridays and the Mark Order podcast on Wednesdays.
Yeah, you can find me on the Twitter at Alex Sourgraps, doing all manner of things on the Fightful .com and everything else. So hang out with us elsewhere if you so desire. And then we'll be back next week trying to decide whether our shark-based film should get the flick out of here. Bye, everybody.
RESPECT. Click the subscribe button and find out what it means to me. Nah, that doesn't have a ring to it. But if you like videos about real news stories that are funny, stupid, or weird, subscribe now.